get up into the steps, like when the real work starts, it disappears. I think it's really funny. It's not true, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so our format here at our Open Big Book meeting is to read and study the first 164 pages of the Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous, along with Dr. Bob's Nightmare. The meeting runs till 8:30, and we'll open up the meeting for questions or comments at the end of that. We also use the 12 and 12. So tonight we finished up with step 7, so we know all about ourselves and our character defenses and what makes us tick. And now we're at a very important point in our recovery. Are we willing? And willingness is really indispensable to get to this place where we're willing to make a list of all the people we had harmed and make amends to them. And the first part of that, though, is really important. Making the list of those we had harmed. My experience went kind of like this. I looked at that list and I said, nah, there's a couple of people who are never going to hit a list. You know, they belong on Never in This Planet My Lifetime list. Will I be able to make amends to them? And then we're going to read it tonight. In the 12 and 12, I understood that underneath the surface are these emotional experiences that I had that I was just really not willing to be forgiving or forgiven. And now that stopped me. That stopped my recovery. It kept me kind of in the secret of my attitude behind that. So in the directions that I work with, and Bobby's going to share a little bit about what he does, is that we have learned to take those names on that 4th step and to really thoroughly do and the book says that we do a drastic self-appraisal. So we take each name and we talk about from the beginning of the relationship, you know, because all relationships really start out awesome. You know, they're loving, they're kind, and then something happens, right? And the ones that harmed, or I harmed or was harmed by, ended up pretty messy. And so I need to know, and my sponsor needed to know, well, what happened from the beginning to that place where you now feel you owe an amends. And I did write the story. And in that story, I saw a repeat of my character defects that I saw come out in my 4th and 5th step with my sponsor. The same defects I identified in step 6 that I had gotten in touch with that only God can remove in 7. And I saw them play, each and every single one of the relationships. And then we took those relationships and we put them on a card, which is what Bobby's going to talk about. But in that, I felt responsible for the whole world because that's who we are, you know, that I owed everybody an amends for existing. And my sponsor made it clear as to what needed to be done. So the reading here is very short in our big book. So we're going to go into the 12 and 12 minutes. Bobby, now you tell people how you do 8 step.
So, what I do is we, you know, look. There's some people and situations in our life that didn't really fit into the rubric of the 4th step with resentment, but people that I had harmed or my sponsees have harmed. So I make a list of the names of those people and then write out what the harm was and then discussed it with my sponsor. And you know, he would need a little bit. I didn't write out a complete story, but need a little background so we know where we're going with that. And then when it was time to do the 9th step, then I did it with the cards. And my sponsor, I put every name that I had on my lists on those cards, and then write out my 9th step, what I was going to say, the harms I thought I had done that I remembered, and what I was going to say after I got done with that. I wrote out the whole thing just so I would have it and know it. But the 8th step harms list was important because there were people that came up in my, you know, searching back through my life that didn't come up as resentments, but I realized I had harmed them in some way. And then as we discussed it, I realized maybe there was a resentment, but it didn't come up at the time of my 4th and 5th step, but they were definitely there. And then when I looked at my role in it, so when we did the 8th step and I came up with names that hadn't been written about in the 4th step, I almost did the same process. You know, what was my role in it, and you know, what did they do? Why did I harm them? What was the harm? And what did I do to cause it? And then I knew what I had to do to rectify it, to make amends for it.
So there's a couple of directions in the big book, and it starts on page 76, where it says that we subjected ourselves to that drastic self-appraisal, where we looked at those names on that list and subjected ourselves to, hey, what went on here? You know, for me, those were the questions I had to ask myself. We go out in the past, and it says, where had I been? Selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and afraid, inconsiderate. And where had I evoked jealousy, suspicion, and bitterness? And those were the three that got me. When I started, those were the questions, you know. Where had I evoked jealousy, suspicion, and bitterness? And I went, oh my God. It was like, you did this to me, well, I did that to you. And that's how it was kind of like going. 9 times out of 10, I really didn't start it, but I kept it going. And kept it going to a place where it really got out of control. And it gets me on 77, it says our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be a maximum service to God and the people about us. I liked the other way around. I have maximum service to the people about us and maybe God. So I didn't have the formula right there either. But the reading in the 12 and 12 really helped me to put that in order, till I was willing to put that name down and to identify, well, yeah, I can go ahead and talk to this person now or later or never on my planet list. And there were people on that list. And what had happened in that relationship, I was able to claim it, I was able to name it, so I was able to talk about it. And so no matter what they would do when they come back on 9, when it say to me, I was okay because I knew exactly what I had done. And I could sit through it. And I could really be totally sorry for my behavior towards them. And I could see it in their faces, the harm that I had caused them. And I was really amazed. I was amazed at the power of my snarky attitude, of my dismissive, abrasive behavior, of my ignoring you over me. I mean, I just was amazed what an effect it had on you. I knew it had an effect on me, but to see it in another person was extraordinary. So the being able to identify that characteristic of untreated alcoholism that I could bring back at any time without God caused a lot of harm. And if I'm going to be able to do that, to fit myself to be a maximum service to God and the people about us, there was no way that I would be able to demonstrate goodwill. The paragraph goes on to say, demonstration of the God in me to see the God in you. Couldn't do that until I was clear. Couldn't do that till that was surrendered up. And then I found that it was easier than I thought it was. So let's go to the 12 and 12 in step 8 on page 77. I have an extra book up here if anyone needs it. So it tells us to make a list of all persons we had harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. Now, it says make a list. So once again, you're doing similar to the 4-step. Many of those people, you're going to find them. They were on your 4-step list. And some of them, like Bobby said, they weren't. But they'll come up in the story as you read through this. So it says steps 8 and 9 are concerned with personal relations. So now we're going to be involved. Up until this point, all we've really done is talk about ourselves. It's all about myself. It's all about everything about me. Now we're going to take what we've learned and bring it into others. It says first we look backward and try to discover where we had been at fault. That's that self-survey. Next, we make a vigorous attempt to repair the damage we have done. You can't do that if you can't name it, right? And third, having thus cleared away the debris of the past, we consider how, with our newfound knowledge of ourselves, we may develop the best possible relations with every human being we know. Right there in that paragraph, I began to, like, my shoulders come off my ears. I begin to be able to see that, you know what? Everybody feels this way. You know what? I don't have to have that aggressive attitude. I used to think things came at me, and here it's telling me it comes from me to you. It comes from me to you. So I used to be ruled by what people thought of me. That drove me. I needed you to like me so I would be okay. I needed to be okay with me and my God, no matter warts and all, right? And step 8 gave me that freedom. I began to have that freedom right here. So it says this is a large order, right? It's a task with which we may perform with increasing skill, but never really finish. Learning how to live in the greatest peace, partnership, and brotherhood with all men and women of whatever every description is a moving and fascinating adventure. I love the word they use, fascinating. Every AA has found that he can make little headway in this new adventure of living until he first backtracks and makes an accurate and unsparing survey of the human wreckage he has left in his wake. That's why we look back to those people, like what happened from the beginning to the end, like what happened? And then the situations start to pop in. You start to see it, like where it went. You know, like I don't like confrontation. So, you know, I'd rather just split. And sometimes the way you split or the way you leave isn't very kind. And people don't even know why you left. You know, I don't like confrontation, and it wasn't a matter of that. My desire to have underneath this worth, this value proposition, so to speak, I needed you to define my worth, and if you weren't defining it the way I needed it, then I left. And I would just split, and I would leave people, and they thought it was them, and it had nothing really to do with them. It says, to a degree, we already did this when taking moral inventory, but it says, but now the time has come when we ought to redouble our efforts to see how many people we have hurt and in what ways. This reopening of emotional wounds, some old and some perhaps forgotten and still some painfully festering, will first look like a purposeless and pointless piece of surgery. That's like, who cares, right? I care, God cares, and your heart cares, right? But if a willing start is made, here's willingness again, then the great advances of doing this will quickly reveal themselves, that the pain will be lessened as one obstacle or another melts away. You begin to see the power of your active alcoholism and behaviors right in front of your eyes. And nothing hit me so hard as that, the truth of that. The truth of what active alcoholism without God is really like and what it does to others. That's one of the reasons I love this meeting, to hear the Al-Anons talk about its impact on us and our impact on them. What happened here, you know? These obstacles, however, are very real. The first and one of the most difficult has to do with, we're going to say the F word, forgiveness. The moment we ponder a twisted or broken relationship with another person, our emotions go on the defensive. Do you do that? I did that. Wait a minute. You want me to do what? Right? To escape looking at the wrongs we've done another, we resentfully focus on the wrong he has done us. This is especially true if he has in fact behaved badly at all. Triumphantly, we seize upon his misbehavior as the perfect excuse for minimizing or forgetting our own. You know, we'll focus on what you did, not on what I did, how I reacted. And you know what? The forgotten piece of this is everybody's hurting. Right?
It's not my fault.
It's not my fault you're hurt, right?
It's your fault.
78. Right here we need to fetch ourselves up sharply. It doesn't make much sense when a real tosspot calls a kettle black. Remember that alcoholics are not the only ones bedeviled by sick emotions. Now my sponsor stopped me here and she said, it doesn't matter if you have 1/10 of 1% of the wrong. The fact that you have any at all is what we need to focus on. So it doesn't matter if he did all the wrong, I was still part of that. I was still participating in some way. So the focus is on what part did I play in that relationship that ended up so badly? What was it? Was it lying, cheating, stealing, evoking, jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? What was it? It was all of the above, right? I might not have done the things that were done to me, but I certainly participated in reacting to them. It says, moreover, it's usually a fact that our behavior when drinking has aggravated the defects of others. We repeatedly strained the patience of our best friends to a snapping point, have brought out the very worst in those who didn't think much of us to begin with, and in many instances we're really dealing with fellow sufferers, here it is, whose woes we have increased. If we are to know about to ask forgiveness for ourselves, why should we start out by forgiving them one and all? And just a comment on forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about condoning. Forgiveness is about setting you free from the harm that was done. Or setting someone else free from the harm you caused. It's all about freedom. This step is all about spiritual freedom. And it's extraordinary when you begin to look at it from a different point of view, from a different perspective. You'll begin to see that relaxing your attitude towards that very person that just hurt you to the core is as sick as you are. and to forgive them the way you need to be forgiven is the most important reason to do it. And suddenly you've lost that ace. It's like the Hatfields and the McCoys, you know, all of a sudden there's the resentment goes. It's lifted. So this step lifts all that. This step allows you to be free. And that's what we're talking about. Do you want to say anything? When listening to people we have harmed, and most of us hit another solid obstacle, we got a pretty severe shock when we realized that we were preparing to make face-to-face admission of our wretched conduct to those we had hurt. It had been embarrassing enough when in confidence we had admitted these things to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. But the prospect of actually visiting or even writing the people concerned now overwhelmed us, especially when we remembered in what poor favor we stood with most of them. It's good to have a sponsor. There are cases too when we had damaged others who were still happily unaware of being hurt. A sponsor helps you define that. You know, if I need to go to somebody to apologize or make amends for what I had done, and to do so would harm them in any way whatsoever, that's not how we take care of that harm. That's not what we do. For example, we were talking about this stuff last night at a meeting, and this woman was talking about how she worked for a shoe store, and she used to steal shoes. She figured out how to get around the security tag, so she stole the shoes. She has lots and lots of shoes. So her sponsor had her figure out an amount, and they found a nonprofit who provided shoes for those who didn't have any shoes. And so she repaid that organization the amount of money that she owed. Because she said, oh good, the place is out of business. Oh, no. There's always a way that we make amends for that which we did. So there's just one example of that. It says, we cried, why shouldn't bygones be bygones? Why do we have to think of these people at all? These were some of the ways in which fear conspired with pride to hinder our making a list of all the people we had harmed. Another thing, we just justify it and say, I don't need to do that. If you're thinking about it, you need to do it. If you're thinking about something that happened, you need to address it. Your sponsor will help you sort it through. But if you're thinking about it, you need to do it. Just that this person keeps coming up. Well, you really need to go say something then. How are we going to say something? We'll help you write the script. You know, and that was another thing that came out of this. My sponsor helped me write the script. She said, oh, say, what would you say? And I told her, she said, you are not ready. To go back and pray about that. And I still had an edge to my voice, or tone that I was taking, because there was still some idea in my head that you were at fault. I didn't get clearly into just me, just my side of the street. It says, some of us, though, tripped over a very different snag. We clung to the claim that when drinking, we never hurt anybody but ourselves. Our family didn't suffer because we always paid the bills and seldom drank at home. Our business associates didn't suffer because we were usually on the job. Our reputations hadn't suffered because we were certain few knew of our drinking. Those who did would sometimes assure us that after all, lively Bender was only a good man's fault. What real harm therefore had we done? No more surely than we could easily mend with a few casual apologies. That's delusional thinking, by the way. If you're thinking about it, it needs to be addressed.
And in this process, it doesn't matter what the other person thinks about what I did wrong. If I know I did it wrong, did something wrong, I have to do something about it. So.
Now let's remember that we're at step 8. At the end of step 4, we started to develop our ideal relationship. And here I really worked on what does ideal relationship look like for a friend? What does it look like for a daughter? What did it look like as a mother? And we began to realize the qualities that I was not bringing to the table that I had to develop to bring to that relationship, and why I had fallen short. I'd fallen short of my chosen ideals, and I was mad at you for falling short. So, you know, began to see that. But this idea, like we've already done that, you know, at the end of 4, and discussed it in 5, and I see in 6 and 7 what had gotten in the way, and given it to God and say, please remove this. But I had fallen short of my chosen ideal in those relationships. As a wife, as a mother, as a sister, as a friend, as a worker, fallen short, because my end goal, the end game I had was, it's your job to make me comfortable. You know, it was a hidden agenda. Didn't realize it until we had gone through all of this work. And I'd be like, oh my God, talk about lack of humility. So this step requires humility, requires truth, requires trust, requires honesty, willingness, brotherhood. You're after a relationship with other people that you can be honorable in. Requires you look at your integrity. What values are important to you? Values that are important to me might not be important to Bobby, but they're important to me. As long as I'm living by my values, cool. You know, and that's what you need to discover in this. I wasn't living up to them in any of these relationships when I first started out. Then I began to. Like, you know, now today I'm trustworthy. Now today my word is good. Now today when I'm going to be someplace, I'm actually there. And I actually stay. I don't split. And if I leave, I tell you I'm leaving. I don't just disappear on people like I used to. You know, I caused a lot of emotional instability. I robbed people of their emotional security more than anything else. So being aware of that, I'm conscientious about being considerate of other people that are in my world. You know, are they considerate back? Sometimes, yeah, but sometimes no. But that's my deal. That's important to me. So that's what I live by. I don't expect you to live by it. It'd be nice if you did. We'll get along better, by the way. Right? Right? But we're learning how to do this, it says, right? It says, no more should men do the few casual pilot. Now, when we have that attitude, it says it's the result of purposeful forgetting. Oh, yeah, I didn't really want to think about that. You know how we can just, like, push it off to the side. You can push it on over there. This is asking you to be as thorough as you can be so you can be free. That's the only reason. So you can be free from those ghosts. So you can be free from those attitudes. So you can look people squarely in the eye. So you walk in a room and not be uncomfortable. So you can just be, you know, come all the way in, sit all the way down, and be okay in your skin. That's what this gives you. This step is so cool. It gives you that. It gives you the freedom to walk further. And by the way, you're not thinking about drinking. I was thinking about fleeing, but I wasn't thinking about drinking. I wasn't thinking about drugging. I wasn't thinking about stealing. I mean, it took a while to not want to flee something. To be able to trust that you're really going to be where you say you're going to be. And trust you that, let's say, you know, I'm talking to John, that you're really going to be at the meeting? Yeah, okay, well, and he said, what if he says yes and doesn't show up? Oh, I feel abandoned. That's all about me again. Oh, well, he might have had something happen. Did I think of that first? I didn't used to. Now it would be like, oh my gosh, I hope everything's okay. Right? Now that's my first thought. It said about me. Oh, they abandoned me again. Because that's our go-to action responses. This lets you look at that and see, oh, look what that did. That's not what it's about. That's not what it's about. And when people know that, you know, you're sensitive in a certain area, especially your network, hopefully they honor that. You know, I know there's people in my network that are sensitive in certain things. I make sure that I just honor that. That's just how they are. Whereas I didn't honor that in my ex-husband. I thought it was a pain in the ass that he wanted me to check in all the time. He's just, you know, he just wanted me to check in all the time. I thought it was annoying. I didn't honor it. Like, get a grip, I'm all right. No, he wasn't. And I didn't honor it. I didn't know how to honor another person's needs. Right? Because it's all about my needs. And this step let me see that. To see the disdain in which I treated that relationship. And you know, I'm embarrassed to say it today, but I learned so much from it. Like, there's no way that would have sustained anyway, because you know it was an addictive relationship. But I saw what I was doing in relationships, falling short of my chosen ideals, falling short of anything you needed because I had to fill me first. And it was so obvious when I wrote those stories about those people. It was really, really interesting. And it says here, it is an attitude which can only be changed by a deep and honest search of our motives and our actions. So by writing the story of the relationship, I didn't get that by doing the cards. I got that by writing the story about that relationship. I saw my motives and actions in that marriage. I saw what I was doing to him. Not that he didn't deserve it in my head all the time, because he did. But I saw my reaction. I didn't want to be that person, regardless of what anyone does. So I began to see it. I began to see the rift and where the crevice started till we had the Grand Canyon in our relationship, you know? Whoa, over there, I don't want to talk to you, right, kind of thing. But I saw it, and here it tells us, it can only be changed by a deep and honest search. And you know, I'm not a good seeker by myself. I needed my sponsor to push that in me. She would say, tell me more of the story. I needed her to, because I wasn't good at it, because I would be justifying, I'd be up there in the purposeful forgetting. And she said, well, didn't you say back here, that's why it's good to have a sponsor, didn't you say like way back here in the 4-step about, what was that about? And we would go off into the story of the truth, right? And they're not kidding, the truth will set you free. Though in some cases we can't make restitution at all, and in some cases action ought to be deferred. Now, for me, I couldn't make that differentiation myself. It was my sponsor who helped me say, no, you're not ready for that, or just hold on, that's not necessary. You know, one of the things as a codependent adult child of an alcoholic behavior I have is I think I'm at fault for everybody. And there were some things that I did not need to make restitution for that wasn't any of my business. I got my business in everybody's business. And I had to learn to step aside. That's none of my business. And some of it was none of my business. I just put myself in there, right? And so I had to learn about that. We should nevertheless make an accurate and really exhaustive survey of our past life as it affected other people. In many instances, we shall find, though the harm done others has not been great, the emotional harm we've done ourselves has. And this is where I really got in touch of the things that were done to me that I acted out sideways. Some of us here are victims of sexual abuse. And I was. And I couldn't figure out, what do I have to make amends to those people for? This is what they did to me. And then I became, well, I became a lot of things, but my behavior acted out sideways, not towards the abuser. I had to find forgiveness for that, and then forgiveness for the collateral damage. But here I began to see it. I began to see how it affected me. I got professional help. I got extra help for it, and I'm free from all of them, all of that. But what it did do is it set up a behavior in me with relationship with men that was deplorable. It really was. And it was based in a lack of trust from that situation. So I had to be addressed, and I had to look at that, and I had to see what the collateral damage of that was. And my sponsor was brilliant to bring me to these pages. So here it says, very deep, sometimes quite forgotten, emotional conflicts, that was a conflict for me, persist below the level of consciousness. Wasn't aware of it, it was on the ripple, right? It was the rumble of my stomach. At the time of these occurrences, they may actually have given our emotions violent twists, which have since discolored our personalities and altered our lives for the worst. And that's what happened to me. And the minute we started talking about it, I started to feel the freedom. I started to feel like getting lighter. You know, we started to talk about what had really happened. And she kind of set straight the facts versus my delusional thinking and emotions. And she separated the emotions from the truth. She helped to separate that for me. So then I could address, well, what did you do when that happened? And I could talk about the coming out sideways behavior that happened with the mirror. All of a sudden I had like 30 more people on my list to make amends to.
So,
What? Go ahead.
So this line, which is very deep, sometimes quite forgotten, damaging emotional conflicts, persist below the level of conscious. I mean, I had a bunch of those, and working through this process sort of lifted that block of the level of consciousness that was blocking it, not making me think about it. And as I realized and worked through some of the things I did remember, it woke me up to things that I never thought I had done anything wrong with, and that were never causing me any emotional problems. And even these things where it says that even if it was a minor thing I did to that other person, it was affecting me, and they may not have even thought about it. But doing this really like freed me up to start seeing the things, and as I did more and more of it, more things came out that I had forgotten about. And even to this day, I mean, as I do more and more prayer, meditation, things like that, every once in a while, or I work I had an, recently I was working with a sponsee and he brought up something that happened to him when he was 4. And I said, holy crap, that happened to me. And I hadn't even thought about it. And it was, you know, this insecurity of going away to my mother dropping me off at a nursery school. It was that far back. And I had a resentment against her for that. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that when she was alive. And I didn't realize that when I first did my divorce. So these things can keep coming up, and sometimes they bubble up from the past when you were going through this process, they didn't come up. But now I'm open to it, and I'm open to hear it, and I'm open to relate to it, and I'm open to identify it, and I'm open to believe or realize that, yeah, I did it too. I'm open to admit it. I'm not blocking it. I'm not forgetting it. I'm not letting bygones, I love that one, bygones be bygones. You know, that's easy. Oh, that happened years ago. I don't have to worry about it anymore. But if I'm even thinking about it, then it's bothering me and disturbing me, and I have to do something about it for my own sobriety and for my own, you know, spiritual living.
So it says these emotional violent twists. So when I was a kid, when my dad would get frustrated, I had a lot of kids in my family, 7 kids in my family, he would put us in the basement, turn out the lights, and lock the door. And then maybe let us out one by one. So not too long ago, it was scary. Ask anyone who knows me. I always have light on, sleep in the light, don't like dark room, to this day. And I know that's where that comes from. But I'm like, I'm okay, I've got nightlights all over the place. So I'm up at the Wilson house, and I have to go in the basement to get something. I don't know if you've ever been down in the basement of the Wilson house, but bottom of the basement of the Wilson house, there's a gravel floor. It's exactly like what my father used to lock us up in. And I'm down there with a friend, and we're getting what they need upstairs in the kitchen, and she goes up in front of me, she shuts off the light. I'm at the bottom of the stairs. I froze. She said, come on up. I froze. And she said, well, come on. And she shut the door. It was like, oh my God. So we get to the top, and about an hour later, I said, I need to talk to you about something. And I brought it all back. And it is a violent twist. You know, so I'm really careful when I'm doing stuff, but every once in a while, she had, I had no idea, you never talk about that. And I said, you're right, I don't really talk about that. Because it's just what happened. It's just what happened. I didn't do anything to deserve it, I didn't cause it, I can't fix it. It is a memory, it's an experience. But this was just a couple of years ago, and she's like, I had no idea. I said, I know. So when somebody's down in the basement, please don't shut the light off on them. You never know what's gonna happen. But I'm really glad we did this. I would have had probably a total panic meltdown attack had I not known that about me. And anyone who knows me knows I just don't deal with the dark one. So it says, while the purpose of making restitution to others is paramount, it's equally necessary, here's another direction, right? That we extricate, that means pull from an examination of our personal relations, every bit of information about ourselves and our fundamental difficulties that we can. Fundamental difficulties. What's at the root? What was the trigger at the root of that fundamental? It's asking fundamental difficulty. The fundamental difficulties they talk about in step 4, dishonesty, self-seeking, fear, inconsiderate. Was I any of that? Was there any of that difficulty going on? Were they snarky to me, so I was snarky back? I mean, you know, that's what happens here. So it's saying right here, since defective relations with another human being have nearly always been the immediate cause of our woes, including our alcoholism, and here we go. No field of investigation, here's a promise, can yield more satisfying and valuable rewards than this one. Nothing is going to give you more freedom than doing this exercise. Calm, thoughtful reflection upon personal relations can deepen our insight. We can go further beyond these things which were superficially wrong with us to see those flaws which were basic, the flaws I just named, flaws which sometimes were responsible for the whole pattern of our lives, right? Thoroughness, we have found, will pay and pay handsomely. So the more we look at it, the more we write about it, and it came out in writing. I mean, I could think all I wanted, but it was when I wrote it down that I began to see it. it says we might ask ourselves what we mean when we say that we have harmed other people. What kinds of harm do people do one another anyway? To define the word harm in a practical way, we might call it the result of instincts in collision. Remember we talked about that in step 3 before we started step 4, that we are driven by 3 basic instincts of life. Best example I can tell you is your social instinct, the need to have companionship with other people. Many of us took hostages as a form of companionship, right? We chased you until you'd like us. That's not what they're talking about. That's instincts in collision. There are many financial security. So I have a job and I step over everybody in order to get to the top. That's what they're talking about, instincts in collision. They're not feeling so good about that. So they're talking about instincts in collision, which cause physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual damage to other people, right? If our tempers are consistently bad, we arouse anger in others, right? If we lie or cheat, we deprive others not only of their worldly goods, but of their emotional security and peace of mind. I never thought of it that way. This was a whole new perspective for me when I first read this, right? That if we lie or cheat, lying by omission counts in this sentence, by the way. Not telling the whole truth, but people know because spiritually we know. We know, right? You'll ask somebody, so are you okay? And they'll say, yeah. Well, it doesn't feel that way. What, do you call me a liar? No, I'm just telling you what I'm sensing, right? That person was depriving my emotional security and peace of mind because I was questioning it and they weren't okay, right? We really issue them an invitation to become contemptuous and vengeful. If our sex conduct is selfish, we may excite jealousy, misery, and a strong desire to retaliate in kind. Such gross misbehavior, that's big, is by no means a full catalog of the harms we do. Let us think of some of the subtler ones, which can be sometimes quite as damaging. Suppose that our family lives we happen to be miserly, irresponsible, callous, or cold. Suppose that we're irritable, critical, impatient, or humorless. You know people like that? Were you like that? My spouse said, were you like that? And I'm like, yeah, I was. But you never knew when, right? Suppose we lavish attention on one member of the family and neglect the others. What happens when we try to dominate the whole family, either by a rule of iron or by constant outpouring of minute directions for just how their lives should be lived from hour to hour? You know, like the AA police telling you what to do. What happens when we wallow in depression, self-pity oozing from every pore, and inflict that about those about us? Do you know people like that? Do you do that? Such a roster of harms done to others, the kind that make daily living with us practicing alcoholics difficult and often unbearable, and Al-Anomics, by the way, I'm going to include you, could be extended almost indefinitely. When we take such personality traits, those are personality traits, right? As these into shop, office, and the society of our fellows, they can do damage almost extensive as though those caused at home. I don't know how many of you have lived in a home that's riddled with alcoholism, but that's what it's like. You never know what you're going to get, and then you turn into just what you left. So it says, having carefully surveyed this whole area of human relations, having decided exactly what personality traits in us injured or disturbed others, we can now commence to ransack memory for the people to whom we have given offense. To put a finger on the nearby and almost deeply damaging ones should it be hard to do. Then as year by year we walk back through our lives as far as memory will reach, we shall be bound to construct a long list of people who have to some extent or another been affected. We should of course ponder and weigh each instance carefully. We shall want to hold ourselves in the course of admitting the things we have done, meanwhile forgiving the wrongs done us. Here we go, real or fancy. Just like resentments might be based in illusion, harms done might also be based in illusion, real or fancy. Good to have a sponsor. We should avoid extreme judgments, both of ourselves and others involved. It says we must not exaggerate our defects or theirs. A quiet, objective view will be our steadfast aim. So whenever our pencil falters, we can fortify and cheer ourselves by remembering what AA experience this step has meant to others. It's the beginning of the end of isolation from our fellows and from God. I mean, what kind of a promise is that? That's like amazing, right? Okay. I want to open, you want to say anything about this reading? Nothing.
Anything else?
You got nothing to say?
I say so.
Okay. Open, the meeting's yours. Questions, comments?